Hello, everyone, and welcome to Film Independent Presents, our year-round screening series. I'm Brian Sheehan, our Senior Manager of Industry Relations. Thank you for joining us today. First off, I'd like to thank some of our partners, our lead sponsor, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, our screening partner, Vision Media, and our media partner, the Los Angeles Times. Today, we have a guest moderator, Michael Lerman, who is the co-founder of the Overlook Film Festival. Check it out. And without further ado, I will pass it off to him and let him take it from here.
Thanks, Brian. I just want to introduce our guests. I'm so delighted and honored to be joined by Marin Ireland and Michael Abbot Jr., the stars of The Dark and the Wicked. How are you guys doing? How are you holding up in these times?
As good as anybody.
I feel pretty good for 2020.
Yeah. 2020 is looking up.
Yeah.
Obviously, I want to talk a lot about the movie and about your performances, but I just kind of wanted to start a little bit about your careers because I know a lot of our audience is up and coming actors and other people in the industry, and I wanted to ask you both how you got started. Maybe Marin, we'll start with you.
Oh my goodness. Well, I went to drama school at this arts academy in California, and then I went to a BFA program at the worst thing you can do in many ways, I guess, is it's like getting an English degree or something where you're like, what am I going to do with this? And then I just drove around trying to get auditions for things. I started in off Broadway, toiled away, making no money for a long time. And then somehow started doing TV after that. But I was just pounding the pavement, doing crappy other jobs forever. It was just a little tiny bit at a time for many, many years. So I don't know. I kind of feel like Mike and I, not to speak for him at all, but I think that's something that we can really appreciate is it's a marathon. It's a marathon. But yeah, there was no it was the most boring story. It was just toiling away for a long, long time in the sort of off Broadway world.
I mean, attrition is a totally valid answer. Michael, did you want to add anything to that? Do you want to?
Well, I went to school at a classical theater training program and arts conservatory in North Carolina, the North Carolina School of the Arts, and then moved to New York in 2000 and spent the first 6 or 7 years of my career doing primarily theater and classical theater and some musicals here and there and too much regional theater. And then in 2007, one of my good friends and a classmate of mine from North Carolina, Jeff Nichols, wrote his first independent feature film, Shotgun Stories. And he called me and said, "Hey man, I wrote you a role in this movie." And I was like, I'm a serious Shakespeare actor. I know nothing about the film. He said, "Just play it cool and I'll show you the ropes." To this day, he's been an advocate for my film and television career and kind of show me how it all worked, and it's turned into a medium that I immediately fell in love with.
That's great. Little did you know there was a Shakespearean quality to Jeff Nichols all along.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which character, but it would be a good book.
It's funny, you both mentioned theater a little bit, and what I think is one thing I think is really great is the subtlety of the performance in this movie. It's very kind of nuanced, and this is going to sound super pretentious, but one of the things that I kept thinking about was Sartre, like Jean-Paul Sartre, with because all the action is internal. So much, all the horror is internal in the movie, all of these things. So I was curious about how you approach that for yourselves in terms of bringing that subtlety to it, because so much of it happens inside your mind, even these long sequences with no dialogue at all. And it's all in your eyes, it's all in expression, it's all in where Brian chooses to put the camera. I'm diving into the deep end just because you both happen to mention that. And it seems like the opposite of theater to me. So I'm wondering where that comes from for you and what your process is with that.
Marin.
Okay, fine. No, it's an interesting thing. I think that, and again, I feel like Michael and I shared this as well, is that I've never found myself having to be oh, I better pull back my performance because I'm on camera. I think, and maybe that's because we also, both of us have acted in like very tiny theaters where you feel like the audience kind of couldn't be closer. But I feel like there is the similarity in that is really just in understanding how to sort of break down a scene and break it down into like smaller and smaller beats. And for us to sort of think about it dramaturgically, and even the way we talked about the scenes and rehearsed the scenes, it wasn't any different than rehearsing a play in terms of the sort of complicated, complex nature of what was going on inside of them and the architecture. I mean, I know for me, like there were definitely many times where Brian and I would talk through it just literally in terms of almost like a dial. Like, so it starts at more like, if that was like a 6, let's try it, start it at an 8 and then take it down to a 4 and then go up to 10, you know, like just trying to find a way to like, to build a structure inside of some of those longer sequences that they feel more monumental, like you said, on the inside. So it's funny that you say that, because I was like, it feels like we were, you know, it didn't feel subtle to me doing it, because it felt so like the stakes were always sky high and just getting higher. So in that way, it does lend itself to sort of a classical. I used to talk about the movie with Brian all the time, like it was like doing a Greek theater, because you're like, doing a horror movie feels like doing a Greek play. You know, it's the same kind of level of stakes, and it's the same sort of the gore and all of that stuff. It stands in for something. It's like it's a metaphor. It's deeply profound in that way of like the highest heights we can achieve as actors and people, like pushing your emotions as far as they can go.
What about you, Michael? I think that, you know, some of the place I came to with that was because your performance is so that, you know, the accent is so thick, and there's this thing where you're swallowing your words a lot of the time, and Brian lets it kind of breathe in those early sequences, especially in terms of between you two.
Yeah, you know, I and Marin can speak to this as well. To be totally transparent, I have never been drawn to the horror genre for no other reason than they scare the shit out of me. I have enough angst as an individual already and anxiety that to add the horror genre on top of it and then to go to sleep, they haunt me in my dreams forever. But you know, the first time I read the script, one of the things that really stuck out to me was that it was the first horror script that I had read that I felt like these were real people. These were real individuals. They weren't caricatures of themselves. As an actor, I have zero interest in running from the boogeyman with an ice pick in the woods. But I felt like these were real people with extenuating circumstances that they were forced to deal with. And the fact that I felt like they were real people and people that I could relate to. I grew up in a small southern town where religion was a huge aspect of the community, where the Baptist church, the Southern Baptist Church, had a strong hold on the people in the community. So the element of religion along with family, and I think those were the things that interest me the most. And obviously this was a very personal script for Brian. He had written it on the farm that he grew up on, which is where we eventually were able to shoot, which I think was, you know, to have that opportunity was invaluable. I mean, it was such a personal film for him. Brian and I have similar family dynamics, similar upbringings. So I think that, coupled with the fact Marin and I had worked together on a film called In the Radiant City back in 2016, playing siblings. And I think we had like 1, maybe 2 scenes together, but we had built the groundwork for a sibling relationship. So we really had a leg up in terms of a place to work from. So Brian was able to kind of draw on that and build based on what we had already built. But yeah, I think the fact that these were real people and people that I could connect to, and the connection to family or the disconnection with family, I think those were the things that spoke to me the most.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like you're looking at my notes because you hit 2 or 3 of my questions in that.
Oh, nice. Oh, so we're done. Good night, everybody.
So I might ask you to expound on a few things, but I did kind of want to start with the camaraderie and whether you spent a lot of time together, you know, either on Radiant City or on, because that was a thing that dawned on me when I was watching, because I'd seen the film, or you know, in prep for this movie, did you spend a lot of time kind of building the sibling relationship more and more?
Michael?
You know, I don't know that Marin and I talked a whole lot about it before we got to Texas. Obviously, I was a huge advocate for Marin from day one. You know, I'm not just going to say this because she's here, but I have never, there isn't another actress, certainly of my generation, that I feel equally as captivated by on stage as I do on screen. And I felt like there was no other person to play this role. Her commitment to Louise and the circumstances, the crazy extenuating circumstances that she has put through, the elements in which she had to fight her way through, I think, you know, it just blows me away. So any opportunity that I have to work with Marin, I'm going to jump at the opportunity. But you know, we did have some groundwork built from in the Radiant City, but these were different people. They were living in different circumstances than our characters from that film. So there was so much said in silence. I feel like there were so many scenes where we sat next to each other and didn't say shit. Like we just didn't say anything. And I feel like Marin is one of those actresses I can look at and I know exactly what she's thinking without words even coming out of her mouth.
No, we had a really, I feel like, just to jump in there, I feel like what's so interesting is it's almost like if we were being cast as romantic, as love interests, like in the Radiant City, like the magic was in the chemistry that was either there or it wasn't. And because we were playing characters in that movie that were like, you know, magnetically drawn to and away from each other, that was like the central, her like nemesis. She like thinks she sees him and like goes outside and pukes on the sidewalk. Like it was such an intense relationship in that. And that movie we spent more time on outside. We were in Kentucky in Louisville, and we spent some more time outside of it because that was the thing. We had one scene together, and it was like the most intense scene in the film. And I feel like we had to lay a little more groundwork, kind of spending time together then and rehearsing that scene. And that scene was, I mean, still remains, because of what Michael did during that experience and like during that shooting day, one of the most kind of profound shooting days I've ever had on anything, because of what Michael brought to that scene. And then when I watched that later, I watched the whole film, I was so blown away by all of his work throughout the movie. And I wished I'd gotten to work with him more on that. So when this came along, I felt similarly, where I was like, well, we got to do this. And weirdly, like you're saying, Mike, like this movie was not the one where we wanted to like hang out. This movie was like, when we were done, it was like, goodbye. Like there were a few days where we did, but you're just like,
I'll see you tomorrow.
Like, yeah. It was just like not that kind of a thing. It was grueling, and it was rough and cold, and we were just sort of like huddled, you know, in the blankets we were together. But that way, I couldn't have done it with somebody I didn't already. I mean, I can't imagine doing it with somebody I didn't already have that complete trust and faith in as an actor. I just knew that he would pull me through every scene. I already knew that he would. I knew that he could, and I knew that he was excited by the challenge of the thing, and I knew that he would give it everything he had, and I knew that I could trust him. And I knew like all of that stuff like that. If we didn't have that from the get-go, I don't know how you make it through a shoot like this. Honestly, I don't. That, I mean, with him and with Brian, because I know we both felt that way about Brian as well. I mean, we were sort of like, it's like we're climbing Mount Everest together or something, where you're just like, all right, we got how many days, how many hours? Right. It's freezing cold. We're in the goat shit. Like, you know, if I've got you guys, I could do it, you know, but otherwise none of us could make it, frankly.
Well, I think there were several instances where early on during the shoot, I remember Marin and I kind of sitting around looking at our watches going, what the hell's taking so long? We should be done with the scene and moving on. And I think Brian would quickly realize, oh, I've got two horror film virgins here. So, you know, we were able to get a master class from a master of the genre in terms of what it takes to sell these scares. There's so many more setups and camera angles. Right. I had no idea. I felt like a kindergartner in school for the first time wanting mommy. But you know, we were incredibly lucky to have Brian as our captain.
That makes sense. You know, it's the conditions, kind of the setting is so palpable with a director like Brian. And I was wondering, you know, we talk about the subtlety, but then also about the kind of Greek theater aspect of it. And is did you shoot in chronological order? Is that kind of a secret to keeping the tension there? Is the atmosphere kind of a secret to keeping the tension there? Because it ratchets up so kind of systematically as the movie goes on.
We didn't shoot in chronological order.
No, but we did shoot, I feel like I'm going to give something away, but I know that we can't. But we did shoot the mom barn sequence like day 2 or something.
Right.
Or day 1 or day 2.
We did.
Like that was, and that was one that I was like, that we had like 2 hours to shoot it or something. And I was like, that's impossible. I remember Michael and I were both, that was one where we were like, there's no way. And because we didn't realize it was going to be in one shot. And we were like, we got to get, and they were like, we're working out the shot, And we were like, there's no way, like what, and then like, we got it on like the first take or something. I mean, it was insane. And also Brian was like, let's throw the goats in there. We were like, Brian, you can't just throw the goats in there. And then it was like incredible. But like that we shot early on, and that I think actually helped in terms of, for me at least, having like a start. Yeah. A starting place in many ways. Yeah.
I guess my question is, because it's so systematic in the edit, were there tricks that you had for yourself if you weren't shooting chronologically to place the dial to say, okay, this is a 7-day and tomorrow's going to be a 2-day, and this is that sort of thing?
Brian was, I felt, for me at least, Brian was so great about helping me set that. So he would like kind of like talk me through where we were, and like, this is higher than this isn't as far as that. But sometimes even just take, it'd be like, let's do one that's 2 notches higher. Let's do one that's 1 notch less. And we'll find it in the edit where if this wants to be more further down or whatever. And even in terms of like sustaining things, like keep it at this level and then let it go up a little bit higher, like things like that, where we would talk it through very, very technically. And I would just lean into him for that. And he helped me pace out a lot of times in terms of my day or my week, being like, all right, tomorrow is going to be a big day, or like, we're going to do a few setups. These setups, we won't hear the screaming. So save your voice for these 2 setups. And then we're going to come right in on that. I was like, okay. And he really, it was like being in with like, being like a boxer with like your coach in the corner, where it's like, all right, before you like go back in, because I really felt like, I felt more dependent on him than with almost, it's hard for me to think of another experience I've had where I was as dependent on the director to like really like pull me through the whole thing and be like, okay, be quiet here, relax here. Like you'll need it, and you'll need it later. You'll need it later, because like Mike said, it'd be like a billion more setups. I mean, I'm not used to that, especially on a low budget thing like this. They're usually like, blow it out. We got to get it. Like, and this was much more about trying to understand the modulation of a day or a week.
Yeah, and I think we were comfortable with trusting his leadership too, because this was such a personal project for him. He had sat on this for so long. He had written it on the farm that we were shooting on. So he knew exactly what he wanted to see in each shot. And once he got exactly what he wanted to see, he and Tristan knew exactly where the camera was supposed to be. And once they got that, we also had the opportunity, for the most part, to get our own takes and to kind of try some of our own ideas, which, that as an actor, that's not something you always get. So it was like the grandma sneaking you the candy in church. It's like, oh, hey, it's not so bad being here if I get to do my own thing. But yeah, Brian was an incredible leader and an incredible actor's director.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about how neither of you have a history with horror. Were there, you talked about it being a grueling shoot, but were there parts of it, fun parts in terms of the effects that you were involved in, or aside from the things just sitting kind of to the side, especially, I think about the vision that Marin's in, yeah.
I had a blast. I would totally do another horror movie. I had so much fun. It was so fun to be able to just go all out and it's like completely jump out of a plane and go crazy at this thing, like that to know that you could go, I mean, farther than you get to go almost ever with your emotions in anything, and consistently, and not like, oh, there's, you know, scenes where you're just like drinking orange juice and then like just one scene later on in a movie. It's like, this is the whole thing.
Right.
That was a total thrill. I mean, I feel like I'm a greedy actor. I know Mike is too, where like you just want to do all the cool stuff all the time. So like this movie, there were no like rest days, you know. It was like, it was fun. It was really fun. It was like a roller coaster. But I also do think, you know, Brian and I talked, like, I've seen a few, enough of like the ones where I would watch them like in the middle of the day with all the lights on, you know, like the Babadook, or like I watched the old school Stephen King, you know, and like I think Brian and I talked about Jacob's Ladder even, which I guess is considered a horror movie, but like is more of a psychological thriller. But like things that scared the shit out of me, you know, that like we talked about in terms of like, right, the ones that I feel like, or like Hereditary, you know, things where I was like, all right, I should watch that, because I actually, even though I don't have an affinity for the genre, because I feel like it'll keep me up for the next 10 years of my life with the nightmares, I can appreciate the artistry of it. And so there were definitely things about it that I was like, I got really into like seeing kind of the way how elaborately it gets made, and a really appreciation for the kind of extra scaffolding that goes into building something like this. That was so inspiring to me.
Right.
We also had the pleasure of working with a crew who at times made our job so much easier, because the attention to detail, and you know, what I think this crew did really well was they went into this farm that Brian had grown up on, and they looked at the lights and they looked at the things that were laying around in the field, and they grew upon what was already there as opposed to building it from the ground up. So it felt so un-Hollywood that it felt like you were just living in someone else's shoes at times. You know, the lighting is so natural, and the art department in terms of you know, some of the animal props that were there were so realistic that I think there were times where Marin and I kind of looked at each other like, did we really bring in real goat parts? Or you know,
like, what is
I don't want to
that?
say it too loud because there's probably a SAG rep around here, but should we be concerned that they broke that leg off? But, you know, that's an actor's dream, to have a crew that's going above and beyond to present you with a product that makes your job so much easier. The place was scary. Like, it was, we didn't have to always pretend it was scary. We were in the middle of nowhere, no neighbors around, no one had any idea we were there, what the hell we were doing.
Brian's like, that's why I make horror movies.
I tell people, it was actually the perfect pandemic film. Had we waited a year and shot it during the pandemic, none of us would have been out of work. We had our built-in bubble. We were all safe. You know, maybe we should have waited.
Maybe you got to make another one. That's really, yeah.
Part 2.
Tell Brian we're going back to the farm.
Yeah, all right. Exactly.
Yeah. This is a little bit of a loaded question, but I just want to ask you guys, did you watch Strangers or any of the other before agreeing to do the film?
I did not. And I told Brian when I first met with him, I was like, I haven't watched your movies. I don't know that I can do it. And he was like, that's fine. Like, bless him forever, because he was just like, you totally don't have to. I get it. It's fine. And I was like, Ron? Yeah. I feel like Michael and I, when the pandemic is over, we have like a standing date I could watch them with Michael. That's probably it. With the lights on in the middle of the day, yeah. You know, like, yeah, exactly. But I feel like I was like, Brian, I'm too delicate. I cannot, I mean, even honestly, frankly, in the last 4 years, my threshold has gone even further down, that like, I can barely watch anything other than like cooking shows and stuff. Like, I can't handle anything. So the world is so terrifying that I feel very sensitive. But I definitely should at some point in my life. But he, luckily, bless him, he was so kind about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can barely watch the 11 o'clock news without breaking.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Right? Yeah.
I remember watching The Strangers when it came out, and I'm sure I was in a theater with some friends trying to be super cool and macho, and then went home and freaked out for 7 months in a row. I did rewatch it before I went to Texas, maybe a night or two before, just to see if I could kind of get into his mindset as a director. And it's such a different film than The Dark and the Wicked. There are certainly similarities, but in terms of the overall feel, I feel like it's so different. And what I think he did here masterfully was taking the horror genre, taking a family drama, and taking a psychological thriller, and melding those mediums together in a way that I know I've never seen before. There may be something out there that I'm missing, but that was certainly one of the things that I was drawn to. But yeah, The Strangers will go down in the history books as one of the freakiest movies out there. And that's
I did ask
for such a sweet guy.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell's going on in your mind?
I do have friends who are like horror aficionados and I asked them about Brian's stuff.
Yeah.
That was the way I did it. I was just like, so talk to me about his movies. And they were like, there's no one better. Like literally there's nobody better. So I was like, okay, sounds good.
The only reason I asked is because it's an interesting trick. Like normally, when you're going out for a job, it's like all these things where you do all this research and you want to, but it's this thing where it's like part of that research is a thing you don't want to touch for personal reasons. And it's complicated, but I don't think it requires being obsessed with the horror genre to be able to play it. And you guys have both proven that so well.
Well, that's what was exciting for us, I think, is to be able to, like, it just felt like the circumstances actually felt like something you could, I mean, Brian said this to me early on, it was like, no, he's like, when I sit down to write, it's like, what's the scariest thing I can think of right now? And then you sort of look at dead in the eyes and write from that. And so I'm like, right, yeah, that's exactly the experience you have reading this script and hopefully watching it, is that like, that's something that's totally playable. For us, we're not playing something like, with the green screen looking at a tennis ball. We're actually playing something like, losing parents and losing everyone around you and being completely abandoned and feeling lost and untethered and grief and all of these things that like that doesn't feel that far away at this moment, and feeling like you're spinning out and not knowing if it's real or not. I mean, I feel like it's, especially right now, it's things we can all really relate to, is feeling like this is we understand that feeling at this point.
But
and even then in that moment
I think that's one of the beautiful things about it, is if you strip away the horror elements, if you strip away the psychological thriller elements of his story, you, at the heart of it, you still have a gripping family drama, and it stands on its own. So that's one of the things that's exciting to me, is because he has been able to layer on these different dynamics that to be a part of is certainly very exciting.
Yeah. I want to make sure we get a couple audience questions in before we wrap up. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but Jamie asks, what's your dream third project of siblings?
Do you have one, Michael?
I want to do a comedy with Marin. I want to do a comedy with Marin, and we're going to be in a tropical place on a beach. And yes, we're gonna go away. We're gonna go to a beach for months and shoot a fantastic comedy.
That sounds great.
I texted you this, or I want to do a Western with you.
Oh yeah, that would be great. That would be great.
There hasn't been a good Western in a while, so I would love to do a Western with Marin.
Yeah, be amazing.
That would be great.
Matt asks, he says, horror movies like this require really intense emotions and reactions, but usually as a response to really heightened, unnatural situations. What was the hardest scene to kind of find the right emotional balance of natural and unnatural of what was happening?
That's a good question.
That's a good
you want me to go first, Marin?
Yeah, I do.
Are your answers written on the ceiling? What's up there?
So aren't yours? Where are yours written?
That's a really good question. I haven't thought about that. I think probably I would say seeing my mother outside of the window, Michael seeing his mother outside of the window. I think that, because obviously I've never experienced that in real life, or don't really have anything that kind of matches that reaction that I might have in that circumstance. I think that was probably one of the more challenging. That, along with the end of Michael, which, I don't want to talk about too much, but I think those were probably two of the biggest challenges for me.
I definitely I think what was harder for me was probably the like big barn sequence with me and the goats, which was so long and crazy. And that was the hard thing about it, is because that was one where it was hard for me to like to kind of hold on to the structure in terms of like how to build and like what I was seeing when and what emotions. It's the kind of thing where I could tap into that was why I was thinking about, is the balance of like being able to tap into the sort of real grounded emotional stuff. Felt like, okay, I can play that, but then adding in things that I'm supposed to be seeing or experiencing that are coming from outside, that are harder for me to sort of generate in that way, where it's like I could sort of do one or the other, but finding that balance was tricky, to be like, okay, I can sort of ground myself in the reality of the situation, but then that was tough for me to sort of navigate. And also it was just like long and cold and lots of goat shit. The goats, I loved those goats and sheep. I loved them. They did get by that the end of that, they were so definitely like walking on my head. Like they were just like, oh, she's just, I guess, a goat. I don't know. Like I was like, you guys, this is backfiring. Like, this is not, I think I gotta get out of here. But mostly a lot of the other things were things that I could sort of find a way to tap into. That scene was harder because I think the balance was trickier to figure out for me, for sure.
Yeah. This is an anonymous question, but I think it's really interesting. Are there any dream stage, but also screen, but since stage has this long lineage of plays, this huge history of redoing plays, roles that you're too young to play now, but you would love to tackle in 20, 30 years?
Oh, in 20 to 30 years, my God, I'll be 97. I don't know about 20 to 30 years, but I've always wanted to do One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest on stage. And
let's do it.
I've had 3 regional theaters commit to doing it, and then at the last minute back out because the cast is so big and it's expensive show for theaters to do. But I would love to do that show.
That's a great one.
I would do that show right now. Post-pandemic.
Yeah.
In pandemic, on Zoom.
Let's do it. Yeah. There we go. I'll get the script. What about you, Marin? I'm curious to see what you would say.
No, I feel like I like abandoned all idea of like a dream role list like years ago when like Michael, you said there's a long time when you're starting to work when I was starting to work in New York, where it was like you could go out of town and do regional theater that's where you would do the classics. And then in New York, it was just like new plays. So it was sort of like I kind of had to give up on the idea of doing a lot of classical roles that I always dreamed of doing. But that said, I would basically do any Tennessee Williams or any Chekhov play character anytime ever, frankly. Like those are just like gimmies. They just change you when you get to do them. So I don't even have like specific ones that I hang on to. But I'll do Cuckoo's Nest with you, Michael, anytime.
Sweet. You'll be a fantastic Nurse Ratched.
We'll do an outdoors production. It'll be pandemic friendly. It'll be great.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Message to all the directors in the
we can have masks on and everything.
It's the perfect pandemic play.
I know, it's a great play. It's a great Zoom play because it can all be in their head. And
if we all get COVID, then we go to a hospital and we do it in the hospital.
We do it there.
Yeah,
even better, site specific.
My last question is, did either of you get nightmares from shooting?
Oh, during the shooting of this?
Yeah.
I remember one specific night, the scene with Michael and his mother in the barn, seeing his mother in the barn. I remember, and I don't know if it was necessarily a nightmare, but I remember it replaying in my sleep.
Right.
And waking up and having a very vivid, clear image of what it was that I saw. But I don't think I was now after I watched the final product.
Yeah, that's a different story.
I had a couple nightmares. Thanks for bringing it up, Michael.
I'm sorry.
I was freaked out a lot of times, like going home to my little housing alone. I was like definitely like leaving all the lights on, and it was creepy. But I actually think that I had a nightmare. I had one night of nightmares, and actually it was about our last phone call. I had, which is weird because it wasn't about any of but I also there was almost no visual stuff that I saw on the day. You know what I mean? Like most of the stuff was then, was psychological, scary stuff, but it was after we shot Michael's side of it first of the phone call. And I was on the phone in my housing. And I had nightmares that night, and weirdly I felt like it was that kind of thing where I woke up because I heard your voice like in the room. It was like genuinely it was like I was actually there. I know I set you up for that one, but I remember like that was the thing that was like the scary thing, is like that sensation of like being on the phone hearing that, which was wild then because I shot my side of it maybe like 2 weeks later or something. But he was still on the phone for me.
Yeah, I was back in Brooklyn.
Yeah, he was back in Brooklyn shooting his side of the phone call, and that phone didn't work, and so I had I forgot about this. I had like a wireless earbud in my ear under the phone with Michael on the call. Sweet. Wow. Michael doing that for me from Brooklyn.
Just like Zodiac sounds.
It was but it was so beautiful because it was like not everybody would do that. You know what I mean? And I usually have like an AD reading lines, but I remember just being like, all right, we're gonna go again. Okay, here we go. Next time we talk to you, I'm in the character.
The cold there? How cold is it? Oh yeah, it's in Brooklyn today.
Yeah.
That's sibling love right there.
Yeah. I was I did it for you. Sorry.
I want to thank you both so much for coming and doing this and being so generous with us. Everyone, please, if you haven't yet, go rent The Dark and the Wicked, share it with your friends, and thanks so much.